The thunder of galloping hooves broke the silence of the Montana plains as Victoria Reed clutched the letter in her trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. For 7 years, she had waited, wondering if this day would ever come, if she would ever see his face again. The letter, worn at the edges from countless readings, held the promise she had clung to through endless, lonely nights. "I'm coming back for you." Victoria stood on the porch of her small homestead, hair whipping across her face in the autumn wind of 1876. At 25, the youthful softness of her features had given way to a quiet determination. Years of running her late father's ranch alone, etching subtle lines around her eyes. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon where a lone rider approached, his silhouette growing larger with each passing moment. Her heart thundered in her chest as the rider drew closer. She would recognize that posture anywhere Lucas Blackwood, the man who had stolen her heart at 18 and carried it with him to war. The man who had promised to return and make her his wife. The man who had disappeared without a word for 7 long years. Victoria squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. She had built a life without him, had learned to stand on her own 2 feet. Part of her wanted to run to him, to throw herself into his arms as she had done so many times in her dreams. But pride kept her rooted to the spot. 7 years was too long to wait for any man. Lucas pulled his horse to a stop at the foot of the steps. Time had changed him. The boy who had left was now a man, his face weathered by sun and hardship, a jagged scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before. His eyes, though those deep blue eyes that had always seen straight through to her soul, remained unchanged. "Victoria," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. She clutched the letter tighter, her knuckles white. "You're 7 years too late, Lucas Blackwood." He dismounted slowly, wincing slightly as his boots hit the ground. "I know. 7 years without a word. I thought you were dead. There were times I nearly was." He took a step toward her, hesitating when she stiffened. "I wrote to you every chance I got. I received exactly 3 letters in the first year. Then nothing." Victoria fought to keep her voice steady. "Nothing for 6 years, Lucas." "I can explain. I've waited too long," she cut him off, the words burning her throat. Too long for explanations, too long for promises that might never be kept. Lucas climbed the steps, stopping just short of reaching for her. His eyes never left hers as he spoke, his voice low and certain. "I'm here now and not leaving, not ever again." Victoria felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to tremble, but she had not survived all these years by giving in easily. "Words, Lucas, just words. Then let me prove it with actions." He reached for his saddlebag and pulled out a small, worn box. "I've carried this across 3 territories and back. It's always been yours." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching riders caught their attention. Victoria turned to see 3 men on horseback coming up the path, and her blood ran cold when she recognized the man in the lead. "Harrington," she whispered. Lucas tensed beside her. "Who is he?" "Preston Harrington. Owns the big spread east of here. He's been trying to buy my land for the past 2 years." She straightened her spine. "And he's not the type to take no for an answer." Lucas's hand moved instinctively to his holster. "Seems I arrived just in time." Victoria shot him a sharp look. "This is my fight, Lucas. I've been handling Harrington and his kind on my own." "You don't have to anymore," he said, but he dropped his hand from his gun, respecting her lead. Harrington pulled his horse to a stop, his thick mustache twitching with displeasure when he spotted Lucas. "Miss Reid," he said, tipping his hat with false courtesy. "I see you have company." "Mr. Harrington," Victoria replied coolly, "what brings you to my property?" "Just making my monthly offer." His eyes slid to Lucas. "Though I'm curious about your friend here." Lucas stepped forward, extending his hand. "Lucas Blackwood." Harrington ignored the outstretched hand. "Blackwood, the name's familiar." "It should be," Lucas replied evenly. This ranch was built by my father and Victoria's father together. I have as much claim to this land as she does." Victoria's eyes widened at this declaration. It was true enough their fathers had been partners once, but Lucas had relinquished any claim when he left for the war. Harrington's face darkened. "Well, that complicates matters. My offer stands, Miss Reed. $5,000 for your property. It's more than generous." "And my answer remains the same, Mr. Harrington. This land is not for sale." Harrington's fake smile vanished. "You can't hold out forever, Victoria. A woman alone can't manage a spread this size." "She's not alone anymore," Lucas stated, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. The rancher's eyes narrowed. "We'll see how long that lasts." He turned his horse, his men following suit. "I'll be back, Miss Reed. My patience isn't endless." They watched in silence as the three riders disappeared down the path. When they were out of sight, Victoria rounded on Lucas. "What claim? You left, Lucas. You walked away from this land and from me." "I never walked away from you, Victoria." "Never by choice." His eyes held a shadow of something she couldn't quite read. "There are things you don't know, things I need to explain." "Then explain," she challenged, crossing her arms. "Explain why you vanished for 6 years without a word." Lucas ran a hand through his dark hair, now streaked with strands of silver at the temples. "After Shiloh, I was captured. Spent 2 years in a Confederate prison camp. When the war ended, I was so sick they didn't think I'd make it. Took another year before I could even walk properly again." Victoria's stern expression faltered. "That accounts for 3 years, not 7. When I finally recovered, I learned that my brother had taken everything my father left behind, sold it all to pay gambling debts." His jaw tightened. "I had nothing to offer you, Victoria. Nothing but a broken body and empty pockets. You could have come back anyway," she whispered. "I would have taken you as you were." "I know that now," he admitted, "but I was too proud. I spent the last 4 years working every job I could find, saving every penny." He pulled the small box from his pocket again. "To buy back what was rightfully ours." Victoria stared at the box but made no move to take it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've purchased back my father's half of the original claim. The papers are all legal and filed in Helena last week." He held out the box. "And I'm saying that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." Her hands trembled as she finally took the box, opening it to reveal a simple gold band, the same one he had shown her the night before he left, promising to put it on her finger when he returned. "I don't know if I can trust this," she said softly. "Trust you. I understand." He took a step back. "I'll prove it to you, Victoria, every day for as long as it takes." The sound of the dinner bell rang out from the bunkhouse, and Victoria suddenly remembered her responsibilities. "You can start by proving your worth around here," she said, closing the box and slipping it into her pocket. "If you're truly staying, you'll earn your keep." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, madam. You can bunk with the hands for now." She turned toward the house, pausing at the door. "Supper's at 6. Don't be late." As Victoria disappeared inside, Lucas stood on the porch, looking out over the land he had dreamed of returning to for 7 long years. He hadn't expected a warm welcome, but he hadn't anticipated the strength and independence Victoria had developed in his absence. The girl he had left behind was now a formidable woman, and he had never loved her more. Inside the house, Victoria leaned against the closed door, her composure finally crumbling as tears slid down her cheeks. She pulled the ring box from her pocket, staring at the simple band that had featured in so many of her dreams. Lucas was back alive, standing on her porch, promising to stay. But the years had taught her that promises were easily made and just as easily broken. The ranch hands watched with curious eyes as Lucas joined them for the evening meal. Victoria sat at the head of the table, maintaining a cool distance as she introduced him. "Some of you may remember Lucas Blackwood," she said, her voice giving away nothing of her inner turmoil. His father was my father's partner when they first settled this land. He'll be staying on and working with us. Frank, her foreman for the past 5 years, eyed Lucas skeptically. What kind of work are you used to, Blackwood? Bit of everything, Lucas replied, meeting the older man's gaze steadily. Drove cattle from Texas to Kansas, worked silver mines in Colorado, did some horse breaking in Wyoming. Horse breaking? Victoria raised an eyebrow. We've got a few that could use your attention then, including that black stallion no one's been able to get near. Lucas nodded. I'll start with him tomorrow. The conversation shifted to ranch business, and Victoria watched as Lucas listened intently, asking intelligent questions about their operation. Despite her guarded heart, she couldn't help but notice how naturally he fit at her table, as if the 7 years had never happened. After supper, as the hands drifted back to the bunkhouse, Lucas lingered, helping Victoria clear the dishes despite her protests. I can manage, she insisted. I know you can, he replied, continuing to gather plates. You've been managing everything just fine without me. That doesn't mean you have to. She paused, studying him in the lamplight. Why did you really come back, Lucas? He set down the dishes and turned to face her fully. Because every place I went, every job I took, every dollar I saved was just a step to get back here, to you. And what if I had married? What if I had built a life with someone else? Pain flashed across his features. I considered that possibility every day. It haunted me. But you came anyway. I had to know, he said simply. Even if all I found was that you were happy with another man, I had to see it for myself. Victoria turned away, busying herself with the dishes. There hasn't been anyone else. No suitors at all in 7 years. I find that hard to believe. She shot him a look over her shoulder. I didn't say there weren't suitors. I said there wasn't anyone else. The implication of her words hung in the air between them that despite everything, no one had replaced him in her heart. Lucas stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Victoria, she moved away quickly. It's getting late. You should join the others in the bunkhouse. Dawn comes early around here. He accepted her dismissal with a nod. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Lucas. As he reached the door, she called after him. That stallion, the black one. He's dangerous. No one's been able to get within 10 feet of him without getting charged. Lucas smiled. I like a challenge. Just be careful, she said, the concern in her voice betraying her attempt at indifference. Always am, he replied. And then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone with the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock and the weight of 7 years of unanswered questions. The next morning, Victoria woke before dawn, as was her habit. She dressed quickly in practical riding clothes and headed to the kitchen to start coffee before the hands arrived for breakfast. To her surprise, there was already a pot brewing and Lucas standing at her stove, frying bacon. You're up early, she observed, trying not to notice how at home he looked in her kitchen. Old habits, he replied, flipping the bacon expertly. Army doesn't let you sleep in. She poured herself a cup of coffee. Neither does ranching. I remember. He slid the bacon onto a plate and cracked eggs into the hot fat. Your father used to drag us out of bed at 4, remember? Said the cattle didn't care if we were tired. The mention of her father brought a small smile to Victoria's lips. He was right. Lucas glanced at her. How long has he been gone? 4 years next month, she said softly. Pneumonia took him quickly. I'm sorry I wasn't here, he said, his voice low. He was a good man. The best. Victoria sipped her coffee, watching Lucas cook with practiced ease. Where did you learn to cook? Necessity, he chuckled. Can't always count on someone else to feed you on the trail. They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness of the previous day giving way to a tentative truce. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they headed out to begin the day's work. Victoria watched from the corral fence as Lucas approached the black stallion that had been the bane of her existence for months. The horse had been captured from a wild herd, magnificent and proud, but so far untamable. He paced the far end of the pen, ears pinned back, eyes rolling wildly at Lucas's approach. "Easy now," Lucas murmured, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not here to hurt you." Victoria held her breath as he entered the corral, carrying nothing but a rope coiled loosely in his hand. The stallion snorted and pawed the ground, a clear warning. Lucas stopped, making no attempt to move closer. Instead, he simply stood, talking in that same low, soothing voice. Minutes stretched into an hour as he remained motionless, just talking to the horse. Gradually, the stallion's ears flicked forward, curiosity replacing fear. By midday, Lucas had managed to move 10 feet closer without spooking the animal. By late afternoon, he was sitting on the ground of the corral, still talking, while the stallion grazed a cautious distance away, occasionally lifting his head to study the strange human who made no attempt to capture him. Victoria brought lunch, sliding it through the corral bars. "You'll starve waiting for that horse to come around." Lucas accepted the food with a grateful smile. "He's worth the wait." "That's what you said about me," she remarked before she could stop herself. His eyes met hers. "And I meant it. Some things are worth waiting for, no matter how long it takes." She turned away, unable to hold his gaze. "The men need help mending the north fence line. That stallion can wait." "Yes, madam," he said. But as he left the corral, the black horse took 2 steps toward him, following him with curious eyes. Victoria noticed and couldn't help but wonder if Lucas would have the same effect on her guarded heart. The days fell into a rhythm as Lucas settled into life on the ranch. He worked from dawn until dusk, never complaining, taking on the hardest tasks without being asked. The hands, initially skeptical, gradually accepted him as he proved his worth through sweat and skill. Each morning, he spent an hour with the black stallion before the day's work began. Each day, the horse allowed him a little closer. Victoria often found herself watching these quiet sessions. Fascinated by the patience, Lucas showed a quality she hadn't associated with the impulsive young man who had left for war. A week after his arrival, Victoria was balancing the ranch accounts at her desk when a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Preston Harrington standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Mr. Harrington," she said coolly, "this is unexpected. Miss Reid." He attempted a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was hoping we might discuss business. My answer hasn't changed. Perhaps it should." His smile faded. "I've heard rumors that Lucas Blackwood claims partial ownership of this property." Victoria stiffened. "What of it?" "His claim complicates things, but it also presents an opportunity." Harrington stepped closer. "Consider marrying me, Victoria. With my resources and your land, we could build something impressive." She nearly laughed in his face. "Marriage, is that your new strategy, Mr. Harrington?" "It's a practical solution," he insisted. "A woman alone, I'm not alone," she interrupted. "And I'm certainly not desperate enough to marry a man I don't love for practical reasons." Harrington's face hardened. "Love is a luxury few can afford in this territory. Security is what matters." "Not to me." Victoria began to close the door. "Good day, Mr. Harrington." He placed his hand on the door, preventing her from closing it. "Blackwood won't stay, you know. Men like him never do. They drift, looking for the next adventure. That's my concern, not yours. When he leaves and he will, my offer still stands. Both offers." He stepped back, replacing his hat. "Think about it, Victoria." She watched him ride away, unsettled by his confidence that Lucas would eventually leave. It echoed her own deepest fear, one she hadn't dared to voice. That evening, as Victoria sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered her one silently, and she accepted with a nod of thanks. "Harrington came by today," she said after a moment. Lucas's expression darkened. "What did he want?" "The same thing he always wants, my land," she hesitated. "And my hand in marriage." The coffee cup froze halfway to Lucas's lips. "Marriage? Apparently it's a practical solution to my situation as a woman alone." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "And what did you tell him?" Victoria looked at him directly. "That I'm not alone." Something shifted in Lucas's eyes, a spark of hope quickly concealed. "He won't give up easily." "No, he won't," she sighed, turning back to the sunset. "He also seems quite certain that you'll eventually leave." Lucas set his cup down with deliberate care. "And what do you think?" "I think." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think that's what you've always done." "Not by choice," he reminded her gently. "Does it matter? The result is the same." Victoria stood, needing to put distance between them. "Trust isn't given, Lucas. It's earned. And right now, all I have is your word that you'll stay. Then I'll keep giving you my word every day until you believe it." He rose to face her. "I'm not the boy who left, Victoria. I'm a man who knows exactly what he wants and is willing to fight for it." The intensity in his gaze made her heart quicken. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine believing him, to imagine a future where he truly stayed. The possibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Actions speak louder than words," she finally said, retreating toward the door. "Then watch me," he replied simply. The first autumn storm rolled in the following week, bringing with it driving rain and fierce winds that rattled the windows of the ranch house. Victoria paced anxiously as reports came in of cattle scattered by the sudden squall, seeking shelter in the hills and valleys surrounding the ranch. Lucas organized the hands into search parties, assigning each group a section of the property to cover. "We need to bring in as many as we can before nightfall," he told Victoria as he prepared to ride out. "The temperature's dropping fast." "I'm coming with you," she declared, already pulling on her oilskin coat. "Victoria, this is my ranch, Lucas, my cattle. I won't sit by the fire while my men risk themselves." He recognized the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had kept this ranch running for years without him. "All right, but you ride with me. We'll take the northwest section." The rain was relentless as they rode out, quickly soaking through their clothes despite the protection of their coats. They found a small group of cattle huddled beneath a stand of pines and slowly herded them back toward the home pasture. As they crested a ridge, Victoria spotted movement in the ravine below more cattle, including several young calves, stranded by the rising creek water. "Down there," she shouted over the howling wind, already guiding her horse down the steep slope. Lucas followed, concern etched on his face as he saw how quickly the water was rising. "We need to move fast." Together, they urged the frightened animals up the slope, away from the swelling creek. The last calf balked at the water's edge, too terrified to move. Victoria dismounted, wading into the icy water to reach it. "Victoria, no," Lucas called, but she was already thigh-deep in the rushing current, pushing the calf toward safer ground. The animal finally moved, scrambling up the bank just as a surge of water slammed into Victoria, sweeping her off her feet. Lucas reacted instantly, spurring his horse along the bank, keeping pace with the current carrying her downstream. "Grab my hand," he shouted, leaning dangerously from his saddle as he reached for her. Victoria fought against the pull of the water, stretching her arm toward him. Their fingers brushed once, twice, before he finally caught her wrist in an iron grip, hauling her from the creek with strength born of desperation. He pulled her up behind him on the horse, her body shivering violently against his back as they made their way to a small line shack used by the ranch hands during calving season. Inside, Lucas worked quickly, stripping off her soaked clothing despite her weak protests and wrapping her in the single wool blanket stored there. He built a fire with the emergency supplies, his movements efficient and focused. "That was foolish," he said, his voice rough with fear as he helped her closer to the flames. The sea calf, her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "Is fine," he assured her, rubbing her arms through the blanket to restore circulation. "But you nearly weren't." Victoria leaned into his warmth, too exhausted to maintain her careful distance. "Why, you saved me." "I told you I wasn't leaving," he said, his arms tightening around her. "That includes not letting you get swept away by a flash flood." As warmth gradually returned to her limbs, Victoria became acutely aware of Lucas's proximity, of his steady heartbeat against her back, of the gentle way his hands continued to chafe warmth into her skin through the blanket. "Why did you really stay away so long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas was silent for a long moment, his breath warm against her hair. "Fear," he finally admitted. "After the prison camp, after nearly dying, I was afraid you wouldn't want what was left of me." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. "Show me." His eyes questioned her meaning. "Show me what you were afraid of," she clarified softly. Hesitantly, Lucas unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a torso marked by scars, some small and precise, others jagged and angry. Victoria reached out, her fingers gently tracing a particularly vicious scar that ran across his ribs. "How?" she asked. "Bayonet," he answered. "During the escape attempt." Her hand moved to another scar on his shoulder. "And this?" "Bullet. Shiloh." Victoria continued her gentle exploration, learning the map of his suffering through her touch. When she had catalogued each mark, she met his gaze. "These are badges of survival, Lucas, not reasons to stay away." He caught her hand, pressing it against his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. "I know that now, but it took me years to believe I was still the man you deserved." "That wasn't your decision to make," she said, a hint of her earlier anger returning. "It was mine." "You're right," he acknowledged. "I robbed us both of time we can't get back. I'm sorry, Victoria. Truly." The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes as he sat before her, bearing both his physical and emotional scars, broke through the last of her defenses. Victoria leaned forward slowly, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began as gentle forgiveness and quickly blazed into something more. Lucas responded with equal fervor, years of longing pouring into the kiss as he cradled her face in his hands as if she were made of precious glass. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have loved you every day since I was 18 years old," he whispered. "Every single day." Victoria closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe him at last. "And I've waited for you every one of those days." "No more waiting," he promised, gathering her closer. "I'm here now." They spent the night in the line shack, the storm raging outside while they relearned each other by firelight, healing wounds deeper than any that had marked his skin. By morning, when the rain finally ceased, something fundamental had shifted between them, a tentative trust rebuilt from the ashes of what they had once been. They returned to the ranch to find that the other hands had successfully gathered most of the cattle. Frank raised an eyebrow at their disheveled appearance but said nothing as they dismounted in the yard. "Victoria." A familiar voice called, and she turned to see her younger sister Lillian hurrying across the yard, skirts lifted to avoid the mud. "Lily." Victoria embraced her sister, surprised. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Helena until Christmas." "I was worried about you with the storm," Lillian explained, then froze as she caught sight of Lucas standing behind Victoria. "Lucas Blackwood," she breathed. "You're alive." "Hello, Lily," he greeted her with a warm smile. "You've grown up." Lillian, now 19, had been just 12 when Lucas left. She studied him with narrowed eyes. "You broke my sister's heart." "Lily," Victoria admonished, but Lucas shook his head. "She's right," he said. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making up for it." Lillian's expression softened slightly. "See that you do." She turned back to Victoria. "I've brought news from town. Preston Harrington has been telling people he's going to marry you by Christmas." Victoria stiffened. "He's delusional," He's also been meeting with the bank manager, Lillian continued worriedly. Something about calling in loans. Lucas and Victoria exchanged concerned glances. The ranch operated on seasonal loans, common practice for cattle operations that saw income primarily after drives and auctions. "He can't do anything," Victoria assured her sister. "Our loans are in good standing," but the news cast a shadow over their reunion. After Lillian was settled in the guest room, Victoria retreated to her office to review the ranch's financial papers. Lucas found her there an hour later, surrounded by ledgers, her expression troubled. "How bad is it?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "Not bad exactly," she sighed. "We're current on all payments, but if the bank suddenly called in the full amount, we'd be in trouble," he finished for her. Victoria noticed his use of we, but chose not to comment. "Harrington must think he can pressure the bank into forcing our hand." "He probably can," Lucas admitted grimly. "Men like him have influence. What do we do?" Lucas sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "We could sell some cattle early. It would be a loss, but it might give us enough to reduce the loan amount. Or," Victoria said slowly, "we could access the money my father left. It's not much, but combined with what we could reasonably sell." "It might be enough," Lucas nodded. "But that's your security, Victoria. I wouldn't ask you to use it." She met his gaze steadily. "It's our security now if you're truly staying." The significance of her words wasn't lost on him. "I am." Victoria stood and crossed to a small painting on the wall, a landscape of the ranch her father had commissioned years ago. She removed it, revealing a small wall safe, and quickly worked the combination. From inside, she withdrew a leather pouch and a stack of papers, which she laid on the desk between them. "This is everything. The deed, the will, the bank notes, and the cash my father kept for emergencies." Lucas didn't reach for any of it. Instead, he came around the desk and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Marry me, Victoria." She blinked, startled by the abrupt proposal. "What? Marry me?" he repeated. "Not because of Harrington, not because of the ranch, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Lucas, I know it's sudden," he continued earnestly, "or maybe it's 7 years too late, but I've never stopped loving you, Victoria. I never will." Victoria studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the hope and fear mingled there. "You once asked me to wait for you," she said softly, "and I did. Through war and silence and years of not knowing, I waited because I loved you then and I love you now." Hope blazed in his eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she whispered. And then she was in his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sealed their promise. When they finally broke apart, Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box he had shown her the day of his return. "This has always been yours," he said, opening it to reveal the gold band. "From the moment I bought it before the war, it's never belonged to anyone but you." With trembling fingers, Victoria allowed him to slide the ring onto her finger. "It's perfect." "Just like you," he murmured, kissing her again. The sound of a throat clearing interrupted them. They turned to find Lillian standing in the doorway, a smile playing on her lips. "I take it you two have resolved your differences," she remarked. Victoria laughed, holding up her hand to display the ring. "Lucas and I are getting married." Lillian's smile widened. "It's about time." She entered the room fully, closing the door behind her. "But what about Harrington? He won't take this well." "Let me worry about Harrington," Lucas said, his arm still around Victoria's waist. "We'll face him together," Victoria corrected gently. "This is our ranch, our future." The determination in her voice filled Lucas with pride. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, strong, resilient, and fiercely protective of what was hers. "Then we should make it official as soon as possible," Lillian suggested, "before Harrington can cause any more trouble." Victoria looked up at Lucas. "How soon can the Reverend be ready?" His smile was radiant. "I'll ride into town tomorrow and find out." The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch. The hands, who had come to respect Lucas through his hard work and fair treatment, offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. Frank, the foreman, pulled Lucas aside that evening. "You hurt her again, and there won't be a place on this earth you can hide from me," he warned, his weathered face serious. Lucas met his gaze steadily. "I won't, but I'm glad she's had someone looking out for her all these years." Frank's expression softened slightly. "She's like a daughter to me. After her father passed, this place would have fallen apart without her strength." "I know," Lucas said quietly. "She's remarkable." "That she is," Frank agreed. "Make sure you deserve her this time around." "I intend to spend the rest of my life trying," Lucas promised. True to his word, Lucas rode into town the next morning to speak with the Reverend. The small church at the edge of town had been built just 3 years earlier, a sign of the growing community. Reverend Thompson greeted Lucas warmly, remembering him from before the war. "Lucas Blackwood, the Lord works in mysterious ways," the older man exclaimed. "We all thought you lost." "Nearly was," Lucas admitted, "but I found my way home at last." "And to Miss Reed's door, I hear," the Reverend said with a knowing smile. "The gossip reaches even my ears." Lucas chuckled. "Then you won't be surprised when I ask how soon you could perform a wedding ceremony." "For you and Miss Reed," the Reverend beamed. "It would be my honor." "How does next Sunday sound? After services?" "Perfect," Lucas agreed, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Reverend." As he turned to leave, the church door opened to reveal Preston Harrington. The rancher's smile faded as he recognized Lucas. "Blackwood," he said coldly. "I heard you were back." "Harrington," Lucas acknowledged with a nod. "Just making arrangements with the Reverend." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Arrangements for my wedding to Victoria," Lucas stated calmly. "Next Sunday after services." The flash of anger that crossed Harrington's face was quickly masked. "How?" "Fortunate for you both. I wasn't aware that Miss Reed had accepted any proposal." "She has," Lucas confirmed. "We're to be married with her full and enthusiastic consent." Harrington's jaw tightened. Interesting timing, just as the bank is reviewing all outstanding loans in the territory. "Is that so?" Lucas kept his voice neutral, though alarm bells were ringing in his mind. "Indeed. The territorial governor is concerned about financial stability with all these new settlers coming in." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "As a member of the bank's board, I've been asked to provide insight on local ranchers' operations." The threat was thinly veiled. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever game you're playing, Harrington, leave Victoria out of it. No game, Blackwood, just business." Harrington adjusted his expensive coat. "Give Miss Reed my regards, and my congratulations, of course." As Harrington departed, Lucas fought the urge to follow and confront him further. Instead, he headed directly to the bank, determined to understand exactly what they were facing. The bank manager, Henry Wilson, was an old friend of Victoria's father. He greeted Lucas warmly but grew serious when Lucas explained his concerns. "There is a review happening," Wilson confirmed, "but it's routine, nothing to worry about for operations in good standing like the Reed Ranch." "And Harrington's involvement," Wilson hesitated. "Preston has significant investments in the bank. His opinion carries weight with some of the board members. Enough weight to call in Victoria's loans prematurely. He's been suggesting it might be prudent," Wilson admitted reluctantly. "But I've resisted. Your return complicates things for him." Lucas leaned forward. "How so?" "Harrington's been counting on Victoria eventually selling to him out of necessity. With you back in the picture, especially with a legal claim to part of the property, his strategy is threatened." "He underestimates her," Lucas said. "Victoria would never sell with or without me." Wilson smiled. "I know that, you know that, but Harrington believes what he wants to believe about women running ranches." He pulled out a ledger. "Now, let's talk about putting your name on these accounts alongside Victoria's." By the time Lucas returned to the ranch, he had a clearer picture of their financial situation and Harrington's intentions. Victoria was waiting anxiously on the porch, Lillian beside her. "The Reverend agreed to next Sunday," he announced as he dismounted. "After services." Victoria's relief was palpable. "That's wonderful." "I also visited the bank," he continued, his expression more serious. "Harrington's trying to use his influence, but Wilson is on our side." Inside, he explained everything the bank manager had told him. Victoria listened intently, her practical mind already working on solutions. "If we combine our resources, we should be able to pay off enough of the loan to make calling it in pointless," she concluded. "I'll ride in tomorrow with the cash my father left." "I'll go with you," Lucas insisted. Victoria shook her head. "One of us needs to stay here. The men are starting the repairs on the north pasture fence today, and someone needs to supervise." Lucas wanted to argue but recognized the logic in her words. This was her ranch, and she knew how to run it. "Be careful," he said instead. "Harrington was in town today. He knows about our engagement, and he wasn't happy." "I can handle Preston Harrington," Victoria assured him, touching the pistol she kept in the drawer of her desk. "He's not the first man to underestimate me." The next morning, Victoria set out for town alone, the leather pouch with her father's emergency fund securely tucked inside her coat. The ride was uneventful, the autumn day clear and crisp after the recent storms. At the bank, Henry Wilson welcomed her warmly, expressing his delight at the news of her engagement. "Your father would have been pleased," he told her. "He always thought highly of young Blackwood." "Thank you, Henry," Victoria smiled, touched by the sentiment. "Now, let's discuss these loans." She laid out her proposal using the cash she had brought combined with Lucas's savings to significantly reduce their outstanding debt. Wilson nodded approvingly as he made the calculations. "This will put you in an excellent position," he confirmed. "Harrington will have no grounds to push for calling in the remainder." As Victoria left the bank, the weight of financial worry lifted from her shoulders. She decided to visit the general store to order supplies for the wedding celebration before heading home. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, greeted her with enthusiasm. "Victoria Reed, I hear congratulations are in order." Victoria couldn't help but smile. News travels fast. "Good news always does," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "We were all so pleased to hear Lucas Blackwood had returned. Such a handsome couple you make." As Victoria selected items for the wedding feast, the store bell jingled, announcing another customer. She turned to see Preston Harrington entering, his expression darkening when he spotted her. "Miss Reid," he said stiffly. "Shopping for your hasty nuptials, I presume." Victoria straightened her spine. "Mr. Harrington, yes, Lucas and I are quite eager to begin our life together." "So eager that you can't wait for a proper courtship." His tone was condescending. One might think there were pressing reasons for such haste. The implication made Victoria's cheeks flush with anger. "The only pressing reason is that we've waited 7 years already, too long by any measure." Harrington stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I visited the bank earlier. It seems you've made a substantial payment on your loans. I wonder where a struggling ranch found such resources so suddenly." "We're hardly struggling," Victoria replied coolly. "And our financial arrangements are none of your concern." "Everything in this territory is my concern," he said, his mask of civility slipping. "Especially when it involves property I intend to acquire." "You will never own my land, Mr. Harrington, not 1 acre of it." His eyes hardened. "We'll see about that. Blackwood's return may have bought you some time, but men like him don't stay put. When he tires of playing rancher and moves on, you'll find yourself alone again, and I'll be waiting." Victoria gathered her purchases, refusing to show how his words had struck at her deepest fear. "Good day, Mr. Harrington." She left the store with her head high, but her hands trembled slightly as she mounted her horse for the ride home. Despite everything Lucas's promises, the ring on her finger, the plans for their wedding, a small part of her still feared that Harrington might be right. What if Lucas did leave again? What if the call of adventure eventually proved stronger than his love for her and the ranch? The doubts plagued her as she rode, so distracted that she almost missed the movement in the trees alongside the road. Almost, but not quite. Victoria reined in her horse, her hand moving instinctively to the small revolver in her saddle bag. "Who's there?" she called, scanning the tree line. Two riders emerged from the forest, men she didn't recognize. Their unkempt appearance and the way they positioned their horses to block the road sent a chill down her spine. "Afternoon, madam," the larger of the two said, a false smile revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Mighty dangerous for a lady to be riding alone these days." "I can manage," Victoria replied tersely, assessing her options. The road ahead was blocked, but if she turned quickly, she might outrun them back toward town. "Thing is," the second man drawled, circling to cut off her retreat, "we heard you might be carrying something valuable." "Money, maybe." Victoria's blood ran cold. They knew about the bank visit. Someone had told them someone who knew she'd be carrying cash. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said firmly. "Now please move aside." The first man laughed. "I don't think so, lady. Hand over the money bag nice and easy, and maybe we'll let you ride away unharmed." Victoria drew her revolver, aiming it steadily at the man's chest. "I said move aside." The men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting armed resistance from a woman. For a moment, Victoria thought they might actually back down. Then the second man lunged for her reins. Victoria fired, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He yelped in pain, falling back. The first man reached for his own gun, but Victoria was faster, swinging her horse around and spurring it into a gallop toward the forest where the trees would provide cover. Shots rang out behind her as she rode, branches whipping past her face as she urged her mount deeper into the woods. She could hear the men pursuing, crashing through the underbrush. Victoria knew these lands intimately, had ridden them since childhood, and used that knowledge to her advantage, weaving through dense stands of trees where their larger horses would struggle to follow. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the sounds of pursuit faded. Victoria slowed her horse, listening intently. Silence, save for the natural sounds of the forest and her mount's heavy breathing. She patted the horse's neck reassuringly. "Good boy. We lost them." But she was now miles from the main road, and darkness would fall in a few hours. Victoria oriented herself using the position of the sun, heading west toward the ranch. The leather pouch remained secure inside her coat, its presence a constant reminder of what she had nearly lost. And of who might have sent those men. At the ranch, Lucas was growing increasingly concerned. Victoria should have returned hours ago. He paced the yard, checking the road so frequently that Frank finally approached him. "Something wrong?" the foreman asked. "Victoria should be back by now," Lucas replied, unable to keep the worry from his voice. Frank frowned. "She knows these lands better than anyone. Probably just got delayed in town." "Maybe," Lucas conceded, though his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "I'm going to ride out to meet her. Want company?" Lucas shook his head. "Stay here in case she returns by another route. If we're not back by dark, send out search parties." He saddled his horse quickly and set out toward town, pushing the animal to a faster pace than was strictly safe on the muddy post-storm roads. As he crested the hill that overlooked the valley, he spotted a rider in the distance moving slowly but steadily toward the ranch. Relief flooded through him as he recognized Victoria's chestnut mare. He spurred his horse forward, closing the distance between them rapidly. As he drew nearer, he could see that Victoria's clothes were torn and dirty, branches and leaves caught in her hair. Her face was scratched, a thin line of dried blood on her cheek where a branch had caught her. "Victoria," he called, pulling his horse alongside hers. "What happened?" She looked up, exhaustion and relief warring in her expression. "Lucas, I was ambushed on the road back from town." Alarm shot through him. "Ambushed? Are you hurt?" "Just scratches," she assured him. "I got away, but I had to cut through the forest to lose them." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Who were they?" "I didn't recognize them. Hired guns, I think." She met his gaze directly. "They knew I was carrying money, Lucas. Someone told them." "Harrington," he growled, the name a curse on his lips. Victoria nodded tiredly. "Most likely. He was at the store when I left the bank. He made a point of mentioning that he knew about the loan payment." Lucas fought down the rage building inside him. Victoria was safe, that was what mattered most. "Let's get you home. We can deal with Harrington later." They rode side by side back to the ranch, where Lillian rushed out to meet them, crying out in distress at her sister's disheveled appearance. As they helped Victoria inside, Lucas caught Frank's eye. "Double the guards tonight," he instructed, "and send someone to town to notify the sheriff about what happened." Frank nodded grimly. "Consider it done." Inside, Lillian helped Victoria clean up and change into fresh clothes while Lucas paced the parlor, his mind working through their options. When Victoria finally joined him, looking exhausted but determined, he pulled her gently into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair. She relaxed into his embrace. "It takes more than a couple of hired thugs to separate me from this ranch, or from you." Lucas pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. "This ends now. Harrington has gone too far." "We can't prove he sent those men," Victoria pointed out pragmatically. "We don't need to prove it to know it's true," Lucas argued. "And I won't wait for him to try again next time he might succeed." Victoria placed a calming hand on his chest. "What are you suggesting?" "We get married tomorrow," he said firmly. "Not Sunday. Tomorrow. First thing in the morning, we ride into town together with as many of the hands as we can spare, and we have Reverend Thompson marry us on the spot. Lucas, once we're legally married, your property and mine are joined. It strengthens our position against Harrington." His eyes softened. "Plus, I don't want to wait another day to make you my wife." Despite her exhaustion, Victoria smiled. "You make a compelling argument, Mr. Blackwood. Is that a yes, Miss Reed?" He asked, a hint of his old charm breaking through his concern. "Yes," she agreed. "Tomorrow." They were married the next morning in the small church with Lillian, Frank, and half a dozen ranch hands in attendance. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, hastily altered by Lillian overnight. Lucas stood tall and proud at the altar, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face as she walked toward him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas drew Victoria into a kiss that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. "Mrs. Blackwood," he whispered against her lips. "Mr. Blackwood," she returned with a smile. As they exited the church, they found Preston Harrington waiting on the street, his expression thunderous. "So you've done it," he said coldly. "Congratulations." Lucas stepped slightly in front of Victoria, his posture protective. "Thank you. Now if you'll excuse us, we're celebrating." Harrington didn't move. "This changes nothing. That land will be mine eventually." "You're wrong," Victoria said, stepping forward to stand beside her husband. "This changes everything. The Reed Blackwood Ranch is now legally joined under both our names. Any claim you thought you might have is gone. And if we ever find proof that you were behind yesterday's ambush," Lucas added, his voice dangerously low, "you'll face the consequences." Harrington's face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Ambush? I have no idea what you're talking about." "Of course not," Victoria replied coolly. "Just like you have no idea how those men knew I was carrying money from the bank." "Be careful with your accusations," Harrington warned. "You're not the only ones with influence in this territory." "Maybe not," Lucas agreed. But we have something you don't. And what's that? Each other, Victoria answered simply, taking Lucas's hand in hers. Something flickered in Harrington's eyes, perhaps envy, perhaps the realization that some things couldn't be bought or bullied into submission. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The newlyweds returned to the ranch with their entourage, where the hands had prepared a modest but festive celebration. As night fell, Lucas and Victoria found themselves alone at last in the master bedroom that had once belonged to her parents. Victoria stood by the window, gazing out at the land that had been her whole world for so long. Lucas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly. She leaned back against his chest. "Not one. I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time. 2 weeks ago, I thought I would live out my days alone on this ranch. And now," Victoria turned in his arms, linking her hands behind his neck. "Now I know I was just waiting for you to come home." "I've waited too long," she whispered, echoing her words from the day of his return. Lucas smiled, drawing her closer. "I'm here now and not leaving," he promised, sealing his vow with a kiss that spoke of homecoming and new beginnings. In the weeks that followed, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Lucas worked alongside the hands during the day, while Victoria managed the ranch's business affairs. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, planning for their future with a sense of permanence that healed old wounds. Word spread throughout the territory of their marriage and their stand against Harrington. Other small ranchers, who had also faced pressure from the wealthy landowner, began to reach out, forming alliances that strengthened their collective position. By Christmas, when a heavy snow blanketed the land, Preston Harrington had turned his attention elsewhere, pursuing railroad interests that took him away from the territory for months at a time. The threat he had posed faded like tracks in fresh snow. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in the cozy parlor, Victoria presented Lucas with a small wrapped package. "What's this?" he asked, surprised. "We agreed no gifts until tomorrow." Victoria smiled mysteriously. "This couldn't wait." Curious, Lucas unwrapped the package to find a tiny pair of knitted booties. He stared at them uncomprehendingly for a moment before understanding dawned in his eyes. "Victoria," he breathed, looking up at her with wonder. "Are you?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "In July, Doctor. Bennett confirmed it yesterday." Lucas gathered her into his arms, his joy too profound for words. After everything they had endured, war, separation, near death, and reunion, this new life represented a future neither had dared to hope for during those long years apart. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "More than I can ever say." Victoria closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "I think you've proven it, every day since you came back." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, Lucas and Victoria Blackwood held each other close. No longer waiting, no longer leaving, but finally, irrevocably home. 5 years later, Victoria stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as Lucas taught their 4-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Sarah, sat on a blanket nearby, playing with wooden blocks under Lillian's watchful eye. The Reed Blackwood Ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. With Lucas's innovative approaches to breeding stock and Victoria's shrewd business sense, they had doubled their herd and acquired additional grazing lands. The small operation had grown into one of the most respected in the territory. Preston Harrington had eventually sold his interests and moved east, his ambitions redirected toward urban investments far from the Montana plains. The threat he had once posed was now just a distant memory. As Lucas lifted James from the pony with a proud smile, Victoria felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. The boy was the image of his father, with the same determined set to his jaw and twinkling blue eyes that could charm anyone. Lucas caught her watching and winked, that same boyish gesture that had first captured her heart so many years ago. Some things never changed, and for that, Victoria was profoundly grateful. That evening, after the children were asleep, Lucas and Victoria sat on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he posed every year on their anniversary. Victoria turned to look at him, at the face she had loved since girlhood, now slightly weathered by sun and wind, distinguished by strands of silver at his temples. The face that had haunted her dreams during those 7 years of separation. The face she woke up to every morning, a constant reminder that patience and faith could be rewarded. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Everything we endured led us here to this moment. I wouldn't change a day of it." Lucas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Nor would I. Even the darkest days were worth it, knowing they would eventually lead me back to you." As night settled fully over the Montana plains, Victoria rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that some journeys, no matter how long or difficult, led exactly where they were meant to home, to the arms of the one you were always destined to love.